Hello, and thank you for joining me again today. There is a kind of person that we encounter in our life's journey quite frequently. Although I will not put a label on it, I'm going to describe the outer features. But when you do put a label on it, they say about 5% of the people in this country, at least, would fit this description. Although some who manifest in certain ways actually are the ones that I was spiritual life coach to because they needed to be incarcerated, unfortunately, and actually removed from society. Because there was a condition of trauma, see, an inability to approach any kind of inner sovereignty, inner life literacy, and they had reached the limits of communication. So their inner life, these people, becomes inaccessible. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's put some clarity and compassion and some philosophical depth to this question. The inner life can become too painful to enter. I don't quite understand this from let's say, a psychological standpoint, as somebody, a psychological scholar or a medical doctor or anything that nature. But from my experientially, I'm going to speak. I worked with inmates, as I've mentioned a number of times, in the California Department of Correction, major prisons there like Quentin and Santa Rita and Folsom. And for these people, their inner life was not a sanctuary. It was a site of injury. And why? Because when they were children, they experienced humiliation, neglect, terror, betrayal, abandonment, chronic instability. And during the formative years, when you're constantly being bombarded with that kind of treatment, your inner world becomes associated with shame and fear, with powerlessness and fragmentation, and with unbearable memories. So the psyche does something very intelligent. It relocates identity into the outer life. Not because the outer life is better, but because the inner life feels dangerous. This is not a moral failure. It's a survival adaptation. So when the inner life is wounded, the outer life becomes a stage. So a person in this state of being, they feel the need to manifest their worth in a visible and often an ostentatious way, okay, or in ways. So when the inner life is inaccessible, the outer life becomes the only place to feel powerful, the only place to feel seen, the only place to feel safe, and the only place to feel in control. So what do? They build personas, reputations, toughness, bravado, material displays, dominance, victim narratives, superiority narratives. These are not expressions of sovereignty. They are defenses against the inner life. And there are reasons why I could not talk to them. And even today, I cannot speak with such kinds of people. behind the walls, they came often, and some listened. This I'd have to say is the kind of thing that confuses most spiritual life coaches, and I've seen it firsthand, and have been beset firsthand. And when someone's inner life is associated with trauma, they develop these protective filters. They cannot hear you. They cannot receive you. They cannot trust you. They cannot tolerate vulnerability. And they cannot allow your presence to touch their inner world. It's not that they refuse to listen. It's that listening would require entering the very place they've spent their whole life avoiding. Your presence threatens their defenses, not because you're dangerous, but because you represent the inner life they cannot face. And again, without labeling this, I will give you this. These types that are that wounded, they fall into two categories: the malicious and the covert. These are defensive strategies. And in these types, how or why, they tend to fall in one of those two categories. This the malicious type. What does the malicious type do? They externalize their pain through aggression, dominance, intimidation, manipulation, control. Am I speaking to you yet? You see? You know people like this. And so do I. And so does everyone. Their inner life is so wounded that they must overpower the outer world to avoid feeling small inside. That's the malicious type. Now, what is the covert type? The covert type will externalize their pain through victimhood, self-sabotage, blame, criticism, and emotional collapse. Their inner life is so fragile that they must recruit the outer world to validate their suffering. So they use the outer world to protect their inner life. And both types are actually doing the same thing. Oh, but there's another type that can't hear you. And this is the privileged type, okay? These are people who in their childhood, they were doted on and they were esteemed into unreal world of privileges. This is the opposite of trauma. Instead of inner injury, they received outer, inflation. Their inner life never developed because they were never challenged. They were never humbled. They were never required to self-reflect. They were never allowed to fail, and they were never taught emotional literacy. So they lived in a bubble of outer superiority, terrified by anything that might puncture it. This is why they isolate, and this is why they avoid depth, and this is simply why they cannot connect. Their inner life is underdeveloped, not wounded, but the result is the same. They cannot enter it. But now there is an inner life aspect of these people. And here's what I'm about to say is kind of a key insight I want you to think about. Their inner life is not gone, it is inaccessible, it is buried, defended, dissociated, unintegrated, uninhabited, but it's still there. My sense is, and more than that, but my belief is that if they could access it, the true inner life, the perfect one, the pure one, healing might begin. But there's a catch. And the catch is real. It's that they cannot be talked into inner life. They must be awakened into it. And this is why Christ's interactions with the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and Herod and Pilate, it kind of makes a little sense, doesn't it? So let's take a look. Let's go back a few thousand years. Take a look at Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. And let's see if we can understand why they could hear Christ. And boy, does this give hope to people in those high places. You see, Nicodemus came at night, and Joseph, he came quietly. Why? Because something in them was still alive. A small ember of inner life awareness. See, they were not fully defended. They were not fully outer life identified. They were not fully closed. They had enough inner life, sensitivity, to feel the truth when it appeared. This is the difference. Christ could not reach the fully outer life people, not because he lacked power, but because they lacked access. He could reach the ones whose inner life still had a pulse. And I saw the same thing in prison. And so I think my hunch is correct. If these individuals could access their inner life, healing would begin, sovereignty would emerge, okay, dignity would be awakened, clarity would return. But the doorway is not conversation. So what's the doorway going to be here? And I know that everybody has been experiencing connections with people you really cannot talk to. So this is the way this is to be handled. This is the doorway. If you love such a person and you wish to connect with them on a deeper level, the doorway is going to be your presence, safety, non-judgment, non-reactivity, witnessing, patience, and the slow thawing of defenses. You cannot talk them into the inner life. But you can be the inner life in their presence. And sometimes, rarely, but beautifully, they feel it. And that's what happened to Nicodemus. And that's what happened to Joseph. And that's what happened to a few inmates who opened to me. So let's consider the deeper truth here. People who cannot hear you are not rejecting you. They are protecting themselves from their own inner life. And the only thing that can reach them, presence, patience, non-reactive sovereignty, quiet dignity of someone who lives from within. This is why not only my work, but your work matters in those types of settings. Not just in prisons, but right there in your own home, with your partner, with your parents that you could never speak to, that you've always tried to connect with. It's like beating your head against a wall. Understanding your own sovereignty is the way to connect. Because you can represent something they have never seen. A human being living from the inner life. And that alone, my friends, is a seed. Thanks for your visit. Go in peace.